Ever hear of the strategy of tension? Well, you're living it. The Monica Perez Show starts now. This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB every Saturday from 3 to 6, covering the news of the week from a libertarian perspective. But we have breaking news today that I think we should lead with. This week, the big story is North Korea, a lot of tension in North Korea. And I do want to talk about that. I have obviously a different perspective. If you've ever heard the show before, you know I'm going to tell you stuff that you're not hearing during the week on the glowing box in your living room that's generating that cable news propaganda. But today in Charlottesville, there was a protest. This is the official story as far as we're hearing about it. Unite the Right is a group that was protesting the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee. So I never heard of this group before, and I don't know what their history is, but the way they're being portrayed, it's basically a patchwork of, let's just say, for shorthand, white supremacists or white, maybe it's alt-right, like however you want to, depending on which side of the spectrum you are, that's how you see this. So there were these protests against removing the statue, from what I understand, and then counter-protests. That erupted in clashes. I think the latest was that a car ran into some of these protesters, and the governor declared a state of emergency, and according to the organizer of this event, Jason Kessler, they called it an unlawful assembly even before the event could start, despite the fact that they had a legal permit to be there. So already we have this conflict about the law. And to me, that's this kind of clash has been happening a lot. I consider them, these clashes that we're seeing, to be in some cases orchestrated, and some cases they just trigger people. They lead people to the trough. A year ago or more, April 2016, there was some kind of assembly like this in Stone Mountain. And I remember I had a little more time, and I investigated the guy who organized that, and he seemed like a downright government operative to me. I mean, that, and even people who were close to those kind of movements, like genuine kind of white supremacist movements, said this guy seemed not quite right, not genuine. The guy who's organizing, it's Jason Kessler, who I believe was credited with organizing the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. He doesn't strike me as a government operative, but if you go far enough back on his Twitter feed and all that, you find that he's an author and he's a writer and he wants PR. So obviously it's not like he's coming out of the woods, with no shoes on and a rope around his waist and just had to defend the statue of Robert E. Lee. This guy obviously is in it for the media coverage. And the counter movements are similar. So you have the right and the left at odds. And this is a classic, or maybe not classic, but I think it emerged originally at the end of World War II when people in Europe were leaning communist. There was a kind of, even in democratic places, people were considering communism. Communism was actually winning at the ballot boxes in some places. And one thing that the Allies did, I think, was called a Leave Behind operation. It morphed into this operation where there was actually terror attacks, false flag terror attacks committed, not by the communists, but they were pinned on the communists to get people to think that it was a violent movement and to not vote for them. And that was labeled a strategy of tension. And that has morphed over the years into what I see now in all this divisiveness. And on the left, there's an organization right now called Indivisible, which leads a lot of these protests. And that, they call it indivisible. They talk about unity. But for me, it's the opposite. It's kind of a newspeak thing. Divisiveness is the word of the day. And the point of it, there is political power in it. It does support the left-right two-party psychological operation that keeps us all committed to this democratic system, keeps us all voting for the lesser of two evils. This polarization does play into that. But one thing but the strategy of tension itself as its own entity, no matter what, whether it's left or right or black or blue or anything like that, is it creates the need, the desire, the perception for the need of stronger government. And this is it's a gateway to totalitarianism, is this kind of thing. And what it does, little by little, is it creates a need or perceived need for more policing, for more military-style policing, for pre-crime, for monitoring, for surveillance, for listening to your conversations. And specifically, in my observation, what that all requires is a neutralizing of the Bill of Rights. Amendment by amendment has been in the crosshairs. And last year, I identified towards the end of last year that the amendment that would be in the crosshairs in 2017 would be the First Amendment. And the First Amendment, I always like to read these passages from the Constitution because you don't always know them. It's Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So when you see political assemblies like this, especially ones that are extreme and distasteful and go violent, it's very easy to start down that path and say, well, this was not envisioned in the civilized society that the founders are talking about. Now, you could go back into the history books and find that it was not, there was a lot of rough and tumble stuff going on back then, but it seems to be addressing the realm of normal discourse. So when you start going outside that realm, that's when people start thinking, oh, well, maybe that's not absolute. Maybe we need some limitations. So this idea of calling it unlawful assembly, is that even really a thing in this country? I mean, granted, the First Amendment talks about Congress, but I think I guess the 14th Amendment kind of brings that stuff all to the local level. You can't abridge these rights even by smaller governments. But so you see, I see this tension as a way to get us on left and right both to open our minds to an erosion of the First Amendment specifically. So I'm happy to talk about this or North Korea. I'm absolutely happy. I think there are elements of the strategy of tension. The purpose of war or fear of war a lot of times is similar, is to get a more totalitarian government, to allow the government to have more power by keeping the people in fear. So tell me what you think, and I'm going to read some tweets. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk, or you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. Binkley, you are my producer here in studio, and I don't know, do we have any tweets relevant to the Charlottesville events? I did tweet a little bit earlier, so what do we got, Pat?
I think so. AJ tweets that controlled opposition always gets massive bad publicity. I hope people see now the alt-right is controlled opposition. Oh, yes. I saw that, and I didn't fully understand what he was saying. Now I do. What he's saying is, this quote is attributed to Lenin. I'm not sure if that's for sure, if he really said it. I think he did. That the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves, something like that. So to me, the opposition used to be the Liberty Movement, and that was a dedication to the Bill of Rights. And that was something that all Americans could rally around and always had the moral high ground. I feel like what's happened on the right over the past
year or two, it's been bubbling up for a while, has been this reversion to a kind of nationalist, populist thing. That in itself smacks of controlled opposition to me, and it neutralizes the right. So the right can crush the liberty movement itself and replace it with this thing, and then they no longer have the moral high ground, and they make legitimate concerns, legitimate pushback on the injustices of political correctness and all that stuff as seeming fringy. And it does neutralize their effectiveness. I think that's pretty clear. So let's get some calls. Let me take a quick break first. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. I want to know... this is breaking news, so you tell me what you think about it. If you think there are longer term implications, what you think about that, and kind of open mic on this. This is Monica Perez.
I'm Judd Hickenbotham. Join us Monday for Atlanta's Morning News with Scott Slade. We'll bring you any overnight developments from North Korea, plus weather and traffic every 6 minutes on WSB.
This is Monica Perez. We're back. It is 84 with scattered clouds outside the studio. I guess my take on Charlottesville really got some people riled up. I just see this as a bigger picture. There's stuff going on behind the scenes. But if you think what you see is what you get, give me a call, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. I'm going to go to Dave and Tucker. Hi, Dave. You're on with Monica. Hi. Don't have a lot of time, though, Dave, so give it to me quick.
Okay.
Did I lose you, Dave?
There's always pressure from the government to...
all right. Alan, I can't hear Dave. I'm going to keep moving. So thanks, Dave. Hang on, Dave. I'll get you. I'm going to Charles in College Park. Can I hear you, Charles?
Yes. Hi, Monica. I appreciate your show.
I can't.
Yeah, hello,
right.
Monica.
Okay, so we will go to... we'll take some... I'll tell you what I think. I have a little problem here in the call. So what I was saying at the beginning, and let's get this conversation started, you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show, is that I look at these protests, especially when they're extreme, and I think that they are being manipulated, whether on purpose or not, by the powers that be to get something accomplished in the political environment. The kind of Rahm Emanuel crisis, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think they've taken it to a new level where they actually create crises for that purpose. So I personally think that's what's going on. But I know a lot of you, so call if you want to express that. A lot of you think that it's what you see is what you get. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. This is Monica Perez. I am the Libertarian Voice on WSB, Saturdays from 3 to 6. And we are talking about this breaking news about what happened in Charlottesville. There was a protest, a rally around by a Unite the Right, it's called, and it was around the removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee. So this is stuff that's been bubbling up. We've talked about it a lot, the Confederate flag. I think there's a lot to this. I think there is a bigger picture policy goals at play here. I think flipping the South is something, like Ossoff wanted to flip the 6th and turn a Republican district Democrat. I think the entire South is in the crosshairs, and the way they're getting to it, the way they're aiming at it, is by making it seem that so we just listened to Trump, and he said we need to respect our history. And I feel like the exact opposite is what's at play here, that the history of the South and the states' rights and kind of detachment from the federal government that the Civil War means to some people is a dangerous political idea in this time of centralizing everything up to the top. But if the left can portray that history as being strictly racist and have no political implications at all, they can eradicate it. And I think that's what it's about. So that's a big idea. I know people have understood or misunderstood some of the things I've said. I can't be sure, so you have to call me and help me tease this stuff out. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You could tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. And I'm just curious if you think, what you think it's all about. Is what you see what you get? What are these people, what are they doing? Are they being manipulated, being used, or is this a genuine grassroots, predictable reaction to the left going too far? I'm going to go to Ron in Canton. Hi, Ron. Thank you for holding. You're on with Monica.
Hi, Monica. Well, when I first started following what was going on up in Charlottesville, it was through the BBC. And when the left started to clash with whatever splinter group of the right they're representing there that was protesting the removal of the statue, the police stood by and let it happen. This thing was meant to turn into a mess from the very beginning.
Okay, Ron, I want to go through this with you. That has happened before. That happened several times before, but specifically in Baltimore. They went out of their way to make sure the thing got big. And I would like to ask you, when did you start watching it on the BBC? When did you start getting this news story?
Probably about as soon as it started, about 2 hours ago.
When I got up this morning, I saw an article about it on the front page of WSB Radio. I'm sure it came from like Associated Press or whatever. And there was nothing about violence or state of emergency or any of that about it being an unlawful assembly. And I thought, this is kind of funny because there's stuff going on here in Atlanta that I want to talk to y'all about.
Well, the thing about Charlottesville,
yes,
and I've lived in the South all my life. I'm 66. If the left wouldn't have showed up at all, those guys would have walked around for a while, got hot and tired, and gone home, and that statue would have been gone.
Yeah.
There was no need for any of it.
But I agree with you that the press was meant to get a lot of press coverage, and I think the press itself signaled that to us by telling us about the protest before it got weird. You know what I'm saying? They cover it. Yeah, like you're right. How did they know it was going to be national news before it got weird?
Well, this day...
International news.
I don't know. I just know the whole thing is unnecessary. And for that kind of mediocre protest thing to draw that much attention is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think there's a bigger picture. Yeah, there's a bigger picture at work here, and I think we've been seeing it unfold. It will continue to unfold. I'm going to Dave and Tucker. Hi, Dave. You're on with Monica.
Hi, I think it's highly ironic that the protest is over a statue of Robert E. Lee. For those of us who are familiar with what Robert E. Lee did after the war, he was actually a force for unification, and I won't go into all the details, but I advise people to pick up a biography of Robert E. Lee and see that he was actually a remarkable positive influence overall. And remember, he was offered command of the Union troops before he took command of the Confederate troops.
And why did he make that decision? I remember there was a pivotal... It wasn't just strictly loyalty and origin, right? It was...
Well, remember, back then there was extremely limited government, and there was a lot more, I should say, provincialism, state loyalty. People didn't travel much. The mail was...
So the state came first.
But not great.
Right.
That would be a lot of it. And after the war, he was part of...
that is interesting, Dave, because it points out that in his mind, I think that what we're getting at here is that for him, at that time, state came before the country. The state was your country. They were sovereign states. And that the Civil War changed that. Somebody pointed out to me once that before the Civil War, they used to say the United States are. After the Civil War, they said the United States is. And now they say the United States were. But the point is that that was a time when, the thing that changed was this idea of the government, the unity, the union was more important than the individual. I mean, that was something that could be, and I think many people think it is, the real turning point for this country. Now, I would say the actual moment, the tipping point of no return, was really World War I, maybe Hoover. Harding and Coolidge, I think, tried to bring it back. But I feel like the history of it that they're trying to eradicate isn't the history of slavery. It's the history of states' rights. But I also think that what's at play here is the strategy of tension, which both sides will look at the federal government to help them out of this. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
89 the high today, 72 the low overnight. We're talking about what's happening in Charlottesville. I'm going to Joseph in Houston. Hey, Joseph, you're on with Monica.
Hey, sweetheart, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right. Well, I can't say excuse me because I don't excuse myself for being a Southerner, but, for sweetheart, you're a darling, I tell you.
Thank
when it
you.
comes to Lee and Jefferson, actually, Stonewall, that was a crisis moment in that period of time that almost broke their spirits because, states were very, very attuned to, the person that lived there, okay? And Lee, he belonged to Virginia, and it broke his heart. He didn't want to go and fight a bloody battle.
Yeah, I thought that, yeah.
Yeah, he did, and same with Stonewall. Neither one of them wanted to have any part of that part of history, but they were thrust into it. And I'm a member of Sons of Confederate Veterans, and I was inducted by a black guy.
What year? What year did you join that organization?
It was, what was it? It was 1996.
I think it changed. I'm running out of time. I hate this, but I think it changed where it was preserving history, and then there was kind of a changing of the guard, and they started putting the flags up, and I feel like that promoted this, was a setup a little bit. Yeah,
not at all. No, not at all.
Okay.
It's an historical society, and there is no sharpening of knives. There's no N-words allowed, and anybody who does that, they are cast out.
Well, sorry, I have to go to a break, Joseph. I'm actually going to switch gears after the break and talk about North Korea. You ready for war? Is that you? What's the answer here? What's the problem and what's the solution? 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to be. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB every Saturday from 3 to 6. We have been talking about what's happening in Charlottesville. It's breaking news, and the president has already addressed it. A clash between an alt-right group called Unite the Right over the removal of a Robert E. Lee statue met with other protests, and the governor declared a state of emergency, said it was an unlawful assembly. And for me, this brings up a whole host of other issues. I feel like this clash has been promoted by the powers that be to create problems among us, divisions among us, for many reasons, or at least several reasons. But the one thing that I'm worried about, one of the things I'm worried about, always the most important thing to me, is our rights. And I feel like the First Amendment, our right to assemble, our right to petition, our right to free speech and the press are all under attack this year. And I have to say, I saw it coming. It was the Fifth Amendment last year. That is still going to be, I think actually the Fifth Amendment's coming maybe next year. The Fourth Amendment was maybe Obama's. Maybe the First Amendment is Trump's. I don't know. But I worry that as we march towards a more tyrannical or totalitarian society, and I'm not saying, as Trump just said, it's not Trump, it's not Obama, it's not that. It's the powers beyond them who kind of set the agenda or try to in the entire Western world. And I feel like and I feel like we are not that our rights, our sovereign citizenship is not high on the agenda of the people who want, say, world government. And I think that they orchestrate tensions through the media and through agents provocateur, particular people, to create problems. And those problems, if they are addressed by the government, often infringe on our rights. So in this case, you're going to say, is the right to assemble absolute, the right to petition absolute, the right to free speech or the press? Is it absolute even if it makes people crazy and makes people do bad things? That's the dividing line. What is the difference between speech and action? And that's what I think is in the forum of public opinion right now. That's what I think these protests, these clashes are being manipulated or orchestrated or promoted or triggered to make that question fall on the side of you've got to have some controls in place. And I think that's the beginning of the end for the First Amendment. But I also think this what's called the strategy of tension about creating divisiveness at home is also that war and threats of war, fears of war, is a very powerful tool for the government to use to control the citizens. As a matter of fact, if any of you have listened to my show for a while, you know that I put a lot of stock in the report from Iron Mountain, which was called a hoax. I don't think it was a hoax. It doesn't really matter because it lays out very clearly. It was a document produced by the government supposedly in the 60s that really laid out the role of war in society. And what it says is that war is the organizing force behind the modern state, this society. That it's not that war is a device to protect society. It is the underlying it's what keeps society together. And the way they talk about society, it's the hierarchy on which they are atop. So it's, for me, society could be a whole lot of other things. But if these guys only care about preserving power at the top and themselves in that position, really as a class, as an elite class, is the way it's laid out. So if you think of it that way and you look at about talking about North Korea, which I think if you listen to the kind of little slightly deeper propagandists like John Bolton and Bill Richardson and even Rex Tillerson came out and said they're not a threat. It's not that they're a threat. It's that the feeling of a threat, the perception of a threat is important for the people to remain consenting to government. So the inside strategy of tension that's dividing us domestically and this fear of outside trouble all go to reinforce power at the top, promote power at the top. And I feel like you have to look at the stuff that you're being fed from the media in that light and dig a little deeper. So that's what I want to do. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. I am going to go to Jalal in Sewanee. Hi, Jalal. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. What's happening?
Hey, I mean, every time they bring up Iran and North Korea and their nuclear weapons and all this, it's just, there's just lies upon lies because these states got their nuclear technology, under basically the auspices of the United States government, back during Afghanistan, Soviet Union, and the Mujahideen. And, we watched, that technology go on the market, and then Iran bought it. Libya bought it, and North Korea bought it, and so Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, all these guys watched that happen, and there's no discussion about that. And,
Jalal.
So now,
go ahead. You can finish, and then I want to tell you something.
Go ahead.
Here's the thing. You're touching on something that I have thought of, and I actually have in my notes here, there's two things I would do. We have $1 trillion a year, roughly, depending on how you slice it, defense budget. And no matter how you slice it, we spend half of all, well, assuming we have the data, but any source I've ever seen, we spend roughly half the defense dollars in the world. So I think two things.
If you add up everything, we spend more than everybody added together.
Correct. So here are my rules then. I would say these two rules. That nobody who ever sells or takes an order, contracts or whatever for any defensive material, weapon, technology, anything that is used in the defense of the United States or is contracted by the government, that company, that technology, all of that stuff stays in the government. You can never sell it as a company. You can't go to sell to other countries. Our government should not allow any country, friend or foe, any access whatsoever to our weaponry. And then the second thing is I would focus our spending on purely defensive measures, Iron Dome, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff. At $1 trillion a year, at half the spending in the world, and actually everybody else's spending would go down because we promote that spending. Sometimes oftentimes our foreign aid is in the form of defense contracts. You don't, like Egypt never gets the money. We send Egypt's foreign aid to Lockheed Martin. I mean, to put it shortly. But that's so you see what I'm saying? Like what you're saying, I think, is touching on what I'm thinking, which is we're the ones who have these great technologies, these great weapons. And if it weren't for us, they probably wouldn't exist. So we should keep them together, keep them close. And then we wouldn't have worries.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is if you know any operators, guys who, whose business it is to do this kind of stuff. If we don't want Iran or Israel or North Korea or to have the technology, then we could make it go away.
I agree with that too. I should say, I was wondering about that. I was thinking, this guy's got some firecrackers, and
no, that's. I mean, it's just I don't know, what the goal is, but the threat is like a it's a fantasy, it's a ghost, so.
And if you look at the role that North Korea plays in the world, it's not so much an actual, it's not a threat to us in the here and now in a, whatever physical sense, but its existence gives us so much. It gives us personally, and their discussion, their banter with the United States specifically, is really the most legitimizing argument for us being in Asia, for us having a massive military presence in a theater that really should not. That people like China and Japan or whatever could have an argument against us being there. And I think, actually, that was the whole point of the Koreas in the first place, that after World War II, when Japan surrendered, the Soviet Union was in the top half and we were in the bottom half. And if we had gotten out, it would have reunited as a communist country. And we didn't want that. We wanted a presence there and we wanted influence in that region. We couldn't have that. So we used it as an opportunity to try to take the whole thing, is my understanding of it. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's my understanding of it. And I feel like it still plays that role today. And that our being there in South Korea against them allows this to be a U.S. involved hotspot that maybe it's just as simple as our military-industrial complex needs to keep the defense dollars flowing in all corners of the earth. I don't know. That's peeling the onion a little bit. But I'm willing to do that next. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. Or if you want to talk a little bit more about what's happening in Charlottesville, Richard, if you want to hold on, I'll take you next, and I'll read some tweets on either subject at Monica Perez Show.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
Scattered storms tomorrow, high of 89 in the forecast. I'm back, and we're talking a little bit about North Korea, but we're also the breaking news of today is this protest in Charlottesville. It opens a whole host of topics, from where is this divisiveness coming from? Is it justified? Is it orchestrated? Is what you see what you get? Is it designed to increase the power of the state, to erode our rights? There's so many things that come out of these conflicts. We can talk about that. North Korea, even that has its the elements of tension that promote the government. I'm digging a little deeper today, if that's even possible. I always dig deep, but I want to hear what you have to say. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. Richard in Lithonia. Hi, Richard. Thanks for holding. What's happening?
Well, originally I called about what happened in Charlottesville. The two are actually closely related, I guess. You're right. It's all about controlling the population. There were many Union generals who are racist and haters, too, and they don't ever talk about tearing down those statues and those commemorations because it's easier to elicit a response if you pick a Confederate general.
And they absolutely have elevated Lincoln to the status of a god. And
right.
If you look at some of the things he said, it would be highly offensive today. I'm not picking on him, but I'm just saying it's
all about dividing the people.
Yeah, it gets stylized. Yeah.
And then you look at Korea, and once again, it's about controlling the people because they're in fear, and what are they doing? They're looking to the government for protection and for a way of erasing this fear instead of looking at what the government is doing to take control over.
Yes, it absolutely benefits them. The way we look at Kim and his funny hair and his ridiculous, weird way of speaking, when the stuff gets translated, it's kooky. If you actually took a step back, and I was burned by this, it was like a Twitter feed from the fake North Korea, which sounds a lot like the real one. They have the same thing. This leader that says kooky things, who, kind of pops off, has kind of crazy hair, all that stuff. It does feed into the power of the government against the people. Richard, if you want to hold on, I'll keep talking to you after the break. Otherwise, I will move on. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. We can talk about what's happening in Charlottesville, what's happening in North Korea, or like Richard was talking about, how they both work to strengthen the power at the top. This is Monica Perez. This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice, on WSB Saturdays from 3 to 6, and we are enmeshed in a conversation about what happened in Charlottesville. And what happened, if you're just tuning in, this happened today. There's a protest. It was Unite the Right is an organization that was protesting the Robert E. Lee statue being removed. And it's beyond alt-right, in my opinion. Like, alt-right, I think, got, made extreme. I think we had a tweet earlier saying it's now the controlled opposition, which, by the way, made some callers irate. So I'm happy to have that conversation if you want. But I am digging a little deeper on this, and I'm saying this is designed to divide us. I think it's ultimately so much of what we see going on today is designed to reinforce the power of the government, to strengthen it, to actually transition us into a society very different from the American experiment, where we have this Enlightenment era and true enlightenment of the Bill of Rights, for example, that restrains the government and enshrines our defenses against the government. And I feel like stuff like this is a way to try to get a wedge in there against the First Amendment. And that's why they called it an unlawful assembly. That expression itself, I think, bears scrutiny. What does that mean exactly? But we just heard the breaking news that a car plowed into protesters, killed somebody, and injured protesters. From initial reports, protesters on both sides. They don't know who it was. They don't know the motive. And to me, that kind of an event, it just reminds me, I'm not jumping to conclusions, I'm not concluding, I'm just saying it reminds me of something I revealed on the show recently. I did a show on Crimea and Ukraine recently, and in that, I played some clips of the Estonian foreign minister talking to the EU chick, Catherine Ashton. She's some kind of foreign, I forget her exact title, but he was explaining to her that the protests in Kiev that really launched the civil war were were sparked, the violence was sparked by snipers that killed people on both sides, killed the protesters and the police with the same bullets from the same location. Somebody was there trying to spark violence on both sides. And that, I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm just saying when I see stuff, I always reserve judgment as to how deep this stuff really is. And in this case, this event was getting some press before it started getting crazy this morning, and that kind of stuff just is a flag to me. But if you want to come down the rabbit hole or pull me back up out of the rabbit hole, if what you see is what you get, in your opinion, I'll go either way. I've got some great calls, but I've got room for more if you want to call 800-WSB-TALK, and we'll do some tweets too. I am going to go to, so if you're on hold, I'm going to go in order, do a little bit rapid fire if you can get to your point, and then we can get everybody in. I'm going to Mark in Atlanta. Hi, Mark. You're on with Monica.
Hey, this is Mark.
Hi, Mark. Yes, you are on the air with Monica.
Okay. Hey, listen. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can and say it as fast as I can. But any time that you see something going on, even in like the protesting it is, and when you see the hot spot that we got in North Korea right now, if it wasn't in North Korea, it would be in Iran. If it wasn't in Iran, it would be somewhere off the coast of Iraq somewhere. Why is it that we can spend this much time and give our attention focused on this much time to do these things, and no one asks the question, ultimately, why? Why are we doing this? Why are we involved in this way? What does this do for the United States? Or is it for the United States? Is it for some elite group or whatever? What is the ultimate outcome of North Korea? Why are we so concerned with that?
Yeah, do you have an answer?
Well, of course I do.
Answer.
My daddy told me always follow the money.
Yes.
And it's all about oil, honey.
Yep. And I think there's two. I will say this. So you said it's all about oil. I would say I always think of the military-industrial complex as a triumvirate of finance, which means debt, of defense spending, which means buying bombs, selling bombs, and the oil, the energy, subsidizing the owners of oil, the buyers of oil, the big oil companies, subsidizing them by softening up the people, the countries that have the oil, by using military and all that to get that oil out cheaper than you would otherwise have gotten it out. Or you could even go one step further and say, the guys at the top in the West, they have all the money. They don't need it, but they want to make sure nobody else has it. So it's exactly almost as good to keep it out of other people's hands. Yeah.
And the military is just a leverage to make certain that it goes their way, and they can control exactly what they want to happen when it happens.
I always try to talk to people I meet from different walks of life. I love Uber for that reason. And when I talk to guys in the service who have come out, they would not be shocked to hear that interpretation that they are being used and exploited when they go.
Absolutely not. And I mean, even though that their heart is focused and in the right place,
of course,
for the most part.
Yeah.
But and by God, please don't take our military away from us. But it's still a fact that they're being manipulated and abused in the sense that what they're doing is.
And I think that when they get out, a lot of them have their eyes opened, which is why you see every once in a while these stories that make you think that they like want to disarm vets, that they worry about their mental health. I notice it every once in a while, and I worry because those are the guys you want on your side, the guys who've seen it, who are trained. You know what I mean? Like if it ever came to civil unrest. Awesome call. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to Jim in Fayetteville. Hi, Jim. You're on with Monica.
Hey, Monica. Hey, I got two things. One on Charlottesville and real quick on North Korea.
Yeah, fine.
I realized last night that, all the stuff between, us and them, what we ought to do is just, anytime, let them know that if they launch a missile, I don't care, we're going to shoot out of the sky.
Of course, yes.
And I think that would, let them know, let Israel know.
And here's the thing. We can.
Okay.
So part of this is that there's THAAD, which is like I think a lot of the anti-missile stuff, it was hard for me to bone up on this stuff in a hurry, but
Right.
the anti-missile stuff, there are like missiles that shoot other missiles out of the sky and stuff, but this THAAD thing is more of I believe it's like an electromagnetic, I don't know what, but there's some in Guam and there's some in South Korea, and they are missile defense systems. We have, when I think about it, if you look at the $1 trillion a year we spend on defense, if we focus that mainly on defense, there would be, first of all, you don't have to worry. North Korea doesn't have it right now, and nobody really argues that they do. There was a Washington Post article that said they were read over the phone an excerpt from a Defense Intelligence Agency report that said we think maybe they've got mini nukes, whatever. So I'm not worried about that, but it's in our capability to be totally defend ourselves. Keep going.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like, just let them know, hey, you shoot a missile up, we don't care if it's just a test or whatever like that, we're going to take it out.
Yeah.
And as far as Charlottesville go, I'm just curious, why now? Why is this stuff, like, we had the protest and the statue removals back in, New Orleans, like that. Why now? Like, those things have been there. I mean, the Civil War's been over with for 152 years. Why now? Why in the last 8 or 10 months since Trump got elected is now all of a sudden all this statuary is inappropriate?
Doesn't he have influence? Like, why is the country going that way? But, yeah, I would say I really think that if you look at, so Obama said we would have he wanted to fundamentally transform this country. And I don't think Obama or Trump are like the centers of power in the world at all. I'm just saying that is what he said. And what I think, I look at this and I wonder whether Trump, I doubt Trump has any awareness if this really is a plan, but if Obama pulled the pendulum as far as it would go one way, and by snapping it back to Trump, they get a violent reaction that gets us back to where Obama or whoever he represents wanted us in this fundamental transformation of the country. And I would say this kind of conflict is meant to disconnect the South from its history, not from its history of slavery or segregation, but from its history of independent thinking. And I know it's hard for people to think that those are two different subjects, but they are, and I think that it's the second thing that's under attack.
Yeah, well, I think part of it, too, is that there's no newscast. Like, they're talking about the alt-right. What was alt-left? Alt-left starts it. I mean, they started back in New Orleans, and now, the right unite or unite the right or like that. That's the reaction to the ongoing onslaught against this, they're taking statues down. What is that? It's from 150 years ago.
Yeah, why make such a big deal out of it anyway? Thank you so much for the call, Jim. It actually sparks, I think at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to play for you some stuff that Binkley here, my producer, found that shows the left actually teaching people how to do this stuff in the nicest possible way. It's really kind of funny how cheerfully they tell you how to how to go in and disrupt protests and stuff like that. But yes, that is, they talk about the alt-right, but it's this, and it's not even alt-left, it's the left. It's the mothership, in my opinion. I'll play that at the bottom of the hour, but I want to keep going on the calls. Charles in Duluth, you're on with Monica. Hi, Charles.
Hey, Monica. Love your show. I just wanted to say that Ulysses S. Grant was a slave owner. Two wrongs don't make a right. He did buy a slave from his brother-in-law, his wife's family in Missouri. They owned several dozen slaves over on their farm. Two wrongs don't make a right, but Ulysses S. Grant was a slave owner.
It demonstrates that it wasn't as simplistic. The issues were not as simplistic then, and that it really, why did these guys go back down to the South to fight? I think it was simply this idea that the state was your country.
Exactly. Robert E. Lee's ancestors, the Lees, fought with George Washington to defeat the bully King George III and got us independence from England. So, there were 22 million Northerners and 5 million white Southerners, and they were getting bullied up all over in Congress. And so Robert E. Lee, being a wise and compassionate Christian Southern Virginian, he said, I'm going to go with my heart, my ancestry, my beliefs, my God, and support Virginia. And that's
well, I think that the history is complex. You can get really credible books that talk about the economic background, the economic motives, the political motives, the provocations, and really thoughtful books that say really ultimately at its heart it was about slavery. And when it gets like that, I mean, even to this day, even when I look at the Russia thing, I try to figure out what's really going on. Putin plays into this stuff sometimes. He plays into some things that I think are completely fake propaganda memes. It's what my favorite podcast, or one of my favorites, James Corbett, says is three-dimensional chess, that you can't always, it's not always as simple as it looks when you get these sound bites on TV, especially 150 years later. So, but it's very, then when you start talking about identity, it gets very emotional. And I think that's why they focus it on identity. I don't really like talking about this stuff because 9 out of 10 times people misunderstand me or project onto me some feelings or generalizations that I'm really not making, or I don't think I'm making, and then it gets emotional, which is why it's so perfect to spark protests. You just see hate in the other person. Both sides see hate in the other people, and I think that's why it's such a powerful weapon the Power League can use to take away our very most basic rights, all of ours, not one side or the other. We will all suffer. 404-872-0750, 800 WSB Talk. If you, Jake, James, you're up next, hang on. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
It is 83 degrees outside the studio. Skies are partly cloudy. I have a time for a quick call. Jake in Habersham. Give me what you got. Unfortunately, I've only got like a minute. Go.
Well, my point that I want to make, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, is the religious statues and monuments that were torn down by ISIS and the religious extremists. How is that any different than taking down any statue, memorabilia? I mean, how is that any different than taking that away from the public? Of any leader, of any person that wants to be memorialized.
Well, do you think, I'm going to answer your question after the break because I really do have an opinion on that. Do you like the statues of, what if it's Saddam Hussein? You want to keep that up there?
Well, and see, that's the point that I want to make. If it is memorialized, who am I to say to take it down?
That's an interesting, yes.
Because at that moment in time, it was important.
That's very, very interesting, Jake. Thank you so much. I'm going to get to that after the break. James, hang on. You're next. He thinks this is meant to get us to hate Trump. 404-872-0750 or at Monica Perez Show.
Please take my hand. Now open your mind to me. Please open your mind. Open your mind. Open your mind.
This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB every Saturday from 3 to 6, talking about breaking news, which is what happened today in Charlottesville. The story is continuing to progress. There was a protest of a removal of a statue of Robert E. Lee, and the organizing force behind that was something called Unite the Right. There were counter-protests. The government called it an unlawful assembly, even though the guy had, Jason Kessler, I think the guy's name was, had a federal judge overturn the state's ruling and give them the permit. So there's that art of ambiguity I've talked about before where both sides can think they're right on this. In the end, the governor called a state of emergency. And after that, weirdly, what's the point of calling a state of emergency if after he did that, a car plowed into the crowd? It's kind of strange. We've had some callers who've noticed that it's weird that the cops didn't really step in, didn't stop it from happening. We've seen that before in Baltimore. There's some weird details here on this story. Before the break, I had a caller, Jake, who pointed out that that in the Middle East there have been statues have been brought down of controversial figures, maybe Saddam Hussein or whatever, and who are we to take these statues down? And maybe I'm not putting his question exactly perfectly, but I just want to address this idea of destroying material, physical reminders of a past. Trump touched on it in his speech earlier, so we need to respect our history. When they go into the Middle East and bomb important multi-thousand-year-old cultural sites, to me, the intention is to destroy anything that could be unifying in the community. But if you go to Germany and there's like a Hitler statue, there aren't, because nobody wants that. There is nothing unifying about that. I actually think that was an anomaly in German history that was a result of outside forces. Nobody wants that. So, but in this case, people look at these statues, Robert E. Lee, and interpret it from two different perspectives. I personally, as a Yankee, I don't have the same kind of understanding of the cultural history, but I always thought of the South. I always thought of the states' rights issue. When I saw a Confederate flag, I thought it was I didn't think that I knew Yankees who had Confederate flags, and to me, they thought it was states' rights, not a racial thing. But when you look at that statue, it has both elements to it now. People think it symbolizes both things. So I don't really know. Personally, as a libertarian, I have the answer in that I don't condone. I'm actually an anarcho-capitalist, but even if I were what they call a minarchist, very small government, I would never condone that my tax dollars be spent on erecting a statue in a public place. I would never, ever condone that, no matter what. If it's Picasso or a political hero, I don't even like it when they name bridges after politicians. So he takes my money, he lives off it, then we build the bridge with our money, and it gets named after him. It should be called Monica's Bridge. They should have picked the name out of a hat, you know? So for me, if you had private property, which I would strictly respect, you could basically put anything you wanted up there. I mean, even if it offended people, stay away. So that's my answer, and I am open to your interpretation. I mean, should we have the statues at all? Does it matter? Like, why is this such a big deal? 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. I'm going to James in Atlanta. James, you are on with Monica.
Yeah, Monica. Yes, I want to talk about this being a false flag. But to the caller like Jake, the last callers, I agree with you. If you want to have something about the Confederacy on your private property, by all means do it. But don't spend my money as an African-American erecting statues of people. I mean, Monica, can you name me one place in America, inside of America, where there's monument to known traitors of the United States of America? The people you erecting statues, let's get history straight. They were traitors against the Republic. Stonewall.
Well, I think that's where there's a real dispute, is that I would say prior to Civil War, prior to Lincoln, the idea that secession was a right that the states had was accepted. I think that's where the dispute came in. That's the whole thing. Millions of people died over that question.
Abraham Lincoln and the Union was trying to preserve the Constitution.
No,
Robert E. Lee and the rest of these guys, they were.
I don't think so. I think that the Constitution was a voluntary agreement among the states.
Yes, but I'm saying, like I said, this has no Confederacy monuments has no business being on any public place where people pay tax.
I don't think any monuments to anyone should be tax funded on public property. I don't believe in hero worship in that way anyway, because these heroes are erected as symbols to control how we think about issues. So now you have, maybe there were real political issues, but we've symbolized it all, and now we can just latch on to our symbol, and they can use that, manipulate us so easily to pit us against each other over a symbol.
Yeah,
so I'm not in favor of it.
It's just amazing that in 2017, almost 2018, we're having an argument about the Civil War. How ridiculous is that? I mean, people you need to get over it, man. I mean, really. I mean, seriously. It's 150 going on.
But what's keeping it alive? What do you think is keeping it
alive? Is people, I hate to say it, people have their, and when people argue about states' rights, I'm like, states' right to do exactly what? To own slaves? That's the states' right they was fighting. You wanted the right to own people as a piece of property, so you would go to war over it? I mean, let's call it what it is. That's what it was about. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And it offends anything that offends your fellow Americans shouldn't be erected.
It's unequivocally wrong and a moral outrage. But I think that the reason it's kept alive as a political issue is that it has so much political power.
It has dividing power, like you say. Absolutely. And then they want to put a false flag on Trump to say, hey, all this stuff wouldn't be going on if Trump wasn't the president. He's making everybody crazy.
But it started under Obama. A lot of this stuff started under Obama. I expected Obama to help unite us, and I feel like he made it worse.
Well, I think he did that on purpose, to cause chaos in the country so the Democrats can be in control. They thought that was going to be their way to holding on to political power. But I just think this is something. Everything that goes wrong now is going to be Trump's fault. Whether it's North Korea, whether it's the Civil War, everything's going to be Trump. Hey, man, you woke up, what? You got a headache this morning? It was Trump's fault. You know what I mean? Everything is Trump because they want to create something. They want to create an atmosphere that everything will go back to normal if we can just get Trump out of office.
I got a tweet when Trump came into office. I asked one of my favorite tweets, Dean. I asked him what he thought the true meaning of the Trump presidency was, and he thought maybe they let Trump get in so they could hang all this stuff on him. I think that there's a chance that he was set up for this from the beginning. Any chance of that? So, all right, I got time for one more call. Robert in Atlanta, you're on with Monica. Robert.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey.
I didn't hear my name.
Sorry, Robert, you're on with Monica.
I really like your show. I trend conservative, but you always are so enlightening.
Thank you.
It's not about the statues that are going up now. I agree with you that political heroes, et cetera, should not go on public property. I think that's probably not a good idea. But the statues that are there, that are being torn down, it seems to me this is not about free speech. It's about political vandalism. I do not see statues of Democrats who opposed civil rights being torn down. I don't see their reputations being besmirched after the fact. And it reminds me of Major General Patrick Claiborne, who was with the Army of Tennessee, said that, and I'm having to paraphrase here because I'm in the car and don't have it in front of me.
Totally fine.
He said that if we do not win this war, meaning if the Confederacy does not prevail, then the enemy will make villains of our heroes and teach that to their children.
That's actually, hold on a second, Robert. That's a good point. And I think that now Hitler, I do believe, was a creation of outside forces. I do not think he represented. But when you look at, so I can understand, that would not be a good example, but which is what I touched on earlier. But in England, you see a lot of statues in England of people you never heard of. You don't know because they've been putting statues up for hundreds of years there. But a lot of those people, if England had not remained a huge empire, would be absolutely demonized as colonialists and murdering indigenous people and all that stuff. But why are they still why is the narrative about them still heroic? Because they were part of a history that is written by the English because they were the victors. They are on top. They didn't have that shameful defeat, and they get to keep their myths in place.
Fight as support for Claiborne's prophecy. Your last caller, anyone who is really a product of public schools comes out thinking that the Civil War was about slavery and equates slavery with states' rights.
That's the problem. Now, the states' rights and slavery thing, because if you read the Cornerstone speech, I was shocked at that. it was like the foundation was about slavery, because I actually felt that the other factors, the economic factors, the tariffs and stuff like that, were really the dividing point. But it's a complex issue. We're not going to solve it now. But I do think that it's kept alive because it's so divisive. You could have two intelligent callers back to back who have absolutely opposite views of the thing. And I don't think that the last caller is necessarily a product of public school. I don't think that's the issue. I think that these are different perspectives. And that's why it's so divisive. So Greta in Romania wants to tell us about the statues in her country. I want to hear it in a second. 800 WSB Talk. You can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. $83 degrees outside the studio. Today's high 89. Tomorrow's high also 89. This is Monica Perez going to Greta in Atlanta. Greta, you are on with Monica.
Hey, in regard to the listener who said, who are we to destroy those statues? I have a little comment. I grew up in Eastern Europe. I'm Romanian. And all Eastern Europe was populated with statues of Lenin and Stalin. And we were mandated to bow in front of them. As soon as the communists failed, the first thing we did, the population, we put those statues down. So maybe when the statue was erected, it might have been represented something. But in time, history changes and the views are changed. So with all respect to history and art, I believe sometimes we should put some statues down, at least in our perspective. Yeah. It was a breakdown with the communist ties to kill those, destroy those statues.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you so much for calling, Greta. It's an interesting question. I mean, I guess because it was a civil war, it's so different, and that people still feel that there are divisive issues that we have not resolved. But my bottom line would be, let's get rid of the making heroes out of politicians and war leaders, and even just using tax money to do that, to make these political levers. Lots of great calls coming up. Stay on hold. If you're on hold, we're going to do some rapid fire after the break. 404-872-0750, 800 WSB Talk, or you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
The most fun I have all week is giving away the prize pack. I am your libertarian voice on WSB. Saturdays from 3 to 6, and I try always to give away the weekend prize pack in the 5 o'clock hour. It is a pair of tickets to see Donald Fagen and the Night Flyers on August 16th at Atlanta Symphony Hall. I like Donald Fagen. Well, I liked Steely Dan. That was one of his bands. First to call 404-741-0750 gets that. That should be awesome. I've got some great calls. I'm going to get to them in just a minute. I do have a couple of open lines if you want, 800 WSB Talk. But I have a couple of very short clips that I think are really interesting, because we can talk about, I've actually, I think, made some people mad, which I hate to do, but I always end up doing it, that when I look at these protests and counter-protests and how the police behave, they hold back, let things get out of control, then it's a state of emergency, like that kind of stuff. Then after it's declared a state of emergency, the car plows through the crowd. I mean, this kind of thing, it plays into the narrative very, it's almost too cute. I have not dug into this event. I do not know what was behind it. I don't know whose idea it was, if it was meant to end up this way. I think a lot of people do think it was kind of set up to be like this. But Binkley, my trusty producer here, has been keeping his finger on the pulse of what I hate to call, but they call the resistance movement. Indivisible. These are all like one and the same, and they're highly organized. They're so well produced. They're so orchestrated that, big money, big thinkers, people who know what they're doing are behind this. There's nothing grassroots about it. As a matter of fact, they actually train the grassroots how to create problems at these events. And we got a taste of that when James O'Keefe came out with the Project Veritas videos that talked about how the guy got fired for once it was revealed. But they would send a lot of people to a lot of different events, and what he said, quote, scenario it out. And like his goal, I believe, was to get an old lady punched in the face. Like that was one of his goals. So here's how they do it. Here's a couple of clips. Binkley, I think we have 2 clips here. This was from a video. What? Can you just give me like a 1-sentence intro to this?
It's instructions on how to disrupt a town hall, and this video or clip that we're about to play instructs people to create confrontation by not giving up the microphone when their turn is over.
So it's about town halls and about the town halls when the Congress is at recess. So let's hear clip 19.
Don't give up the mic until you have an answer. If a staffer tries to take the mic, stand up for yourself. Up.
I mean, it's a video, right? That's what I wanted to ask you. That came from a video.
Yeah.
Okay. I did not see the video. So what is it? The chick's telling the instructions and this guy is like pantomiming?
Yeah, he's acting it out. He actually has a mic stand and he's, sticking his hand away.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do this in some of these videos, and it's not as light and fluffy as this commercial makes it out.
Right. So he's demonstrating how to do it.
Yes.
And then the next clip is what? She continues to give you different ways of different ways to disrupt at the crowd. And this time they're encouraging people to use the mob mentality of the crowd. Okay. So let's hear clip 20.
Another tactic, involve the crowd. Ask your fellow constituents to cheer if they want to hear an answer. There is strength in numbers.
So what she's saying is try to get people worked up.
Yeah, that's exactly what she's saying.
And she's doing it so lightly and fluffily. But they mean for bad things to happen, and I think I don't know if you have a clip, a real short clip. I don't know if that thing was even audio or televised. I don't think we have it. But there was why don't you tell me? Wasn't there an event in Georgia this week where somebody did? Can you describe that for me in like 1 second?
Yeah, it was Doug Collins' town hall, and they had a bunch of indivisible people there.
He's a congressman.
Yeah, using these tactics, and it was chaos, and it wasn't light and fluffy. It was, why do you want to kill my family? Stuff like that.
I heard I didn't see the video, but I heard a longer version of this audio, and they talk about how they talk about wearing the same clothes, making the same signs. They really tell you how to get it done. And I know that there were handbooks about this kind of stuff during like the color revolutions and in Ukraine and stuff, and even in Baltimore. So I remember there were flyers in Ukraine of how to like wear a hoodie and not be recognized, and those same things popped up in Baltimore. So these things aren't a joke. I'm gonna go to some calls unless you want to give me a punctuation mark.
Well, I'd say the most extreme thing that happened at that event was a girl stood up holding a sign saying, "Doug Collins voted to kill me." And then everybody marched out.
I think you sent me like a still of that. That's hilarious. Well, it's not hilarious if the guy actually is trying to kill her, but it's hilarious because the guy did not vote to kill her. So anyway, all right. Thank you very much for that little comic relief. I am going to the calls. I'm going to Alan in Athens. Alan, you are on with Monica.
Yes, Monica, I just wanted to say that both sides of this issue would do well to think that, be advised that both sides of the war were financed by pretty much the same banks, and leaders at the very top of both sides were members of secret societies. Well, the war and its outcome was a foregone conclusion decades before it ever started. I just would like to put that out there.
Don't hang up, Alan, because that's the kind of what I call deep history that I like to dig into, and I've touched on it with the Civil War, but I've never really felt like I knew what direction to go in. I heard things about Russia on one side, other European countries, England. Can you, in a nutshell, tell me what you think, who was on which side? Can you give it real short so people can understand it, what you think was really happening?
Yes, ma'am. There was a comment made by Benjamin Disraeli, I think in 1847, that said, hey, basically, in a nutshell, we're just going to whoop up fervor on both sides and just basically bring everything to a head.
So he was let me just say, he was the Prime Minister of England at the time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so was this like the Revolutionary War Part 3 and they won?
Well, basically, our Southern ancestors way back when, basically would not give way on the issue of slavery when the Republic was first founded. So that had to be put off till later. And of course...
Oh, no, Alan, I actually thought the British wouldn't allow it because they, for political reasons, had to get rid of it there.
Well,
but the banks and the shipping...
This is once independence was gained, though.
I don't know. I think the British still had influence over it.
I don't know. I have to look into that.
Okay, give me another sentence. One more sentence.
Jefferson said it's a fire bell in the night. It's going to be an issue that's going to crop up again.
All right. So it sounds like it was in part a foreign plot. But I'll tell you, if you have one book that you can recommend that I read, Alan, that would help illuminate this, I would love that.
Well, there's a book called The South Under Siege by Frank Connor, and if you look at it online, you can find it. It's pretty informative.
All right, I'll look into it. A lot of times, stuff like that. Alan, thank you for the call. I like different ideas. Binkley, have you heard of that book?
I have not.
You have not? Okay. So I know nothing about that book. So a lot of times, people recommend books like that. But if there is a deeper history, I would say there's usually more books out there that reflect disinformation, that try to mess up the deeper history so you can never get to it. So Alan, I really appreciate the recommendation. I will have to vet it before I recommend it myself, but I appreciate the name of it. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Peggy in Athens. Peggy, you're on with Monica.
Hey, Monica. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Taxpayer money being spent on statues and things like that, that's ridiculous. But a caller that you had about 4 back, the gentleman said, everything from the Civil War needs to be gone. And he made the comment, anything that offends anybody should be taken down.
I thought he said that offends Americans.
Well, basically offends anybody.
Yeah, okay.
Offends Americans. And that's the problem. Everybody is offended by everything. And that's an erosion, obviously, of the First Amendment. And let me offend the feminists. Man up, and if you don't like something, don't watch it, don't go look at it, don't listen to it. Everybody's offended by everything. And when you made the comment to him that the divide was really stoked at the beginning of it, of where we are now by Obama, it makes me think all these statues being taken down, who's paying the people to do that? Just like the Soros people or whoever, paid people to protest in Ferguson and Baltimore and things like that. They are playing everybody. They are dividing everybody.
Yeah, it's actually, by taking this action, it is quite divisive. And I would just say, insert my libertarianism here, I wouldn't pay tax money to put it up. I wouldn't pay tax money to put it down. You don't need to make social statements at the government level. That's not what it's for. But that is what the government is used to manipulate us socially and culturally. That's what it's there. That people don't realize, because you think that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights Declaration of Independence defines the operational paradigm, if you will, the basic structure, the scaffolding of this country. But it's really gotten to the point where it's a social, we're being manipulated socially for the interests of the people at the top. And this plays into it. But but the fact that it's all on public land is what makes it, you do away with it. Yeah, take up a collection if you want to get rid of it. It's on public land. If it offends people, I don't think we should have put it up with public money. It's just like segregation. There should not be a law that you can have tax-funded schools and have them segregated, or that a private soda fountain should be forced to segregate. In public places, there's no place for that stuff. Privately, as a libertarian, I can't force people to not do those things, but I don't like it. And if in a free society where they didn't waste money on this stuff, it wouldn't be divisive. Did I throw you off there?
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-oh, yeah.
Okay, I wholeheartedly believe in, NWO, that kind of thing, the people that want to promote the one world government. And, of course, it sounds warm and fuzzy when they explain it to everybody, but they're the ones in power, and we're not. How do we break that? How do we get out from under that? How do we stop them?
Dude, Peggy, I'm so trying to figure that out, like every day, all day long. I feel like just having these conversations on the air with a lot of people like you I'm trying to figure out like the true nature of the power structure and how to get, because I think their ultimate goal, it starts with population reduction. Like really, that's what I'm afraid of with wars.
Oh, sure.
Like the purpose is population reduction because that's how they can keep the power. They can't keep the power with that. So it's a real problem in real time. And the most, as far as I've gotten, as what the answer is to try to keep it, to try to vet it and get people thinking about it because they spend so much effort on the propaganda. I have to believe our minds are what they need, our consent. They really need it. So if we keep talking to each other and have a little bit of courage and do our own research, I feel like that has to be the first step. Thank you very much for the call. Wrap it up after the break. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
87 degrees forecast for Monday with a 60% chance of rain, but that could change. So stay tuned to WSB for weekend weather brought to you by Shoemate Heating and Air. And we do not have a lot of time, so I'm sorry to say no more calls, but it has been quite a lively conversation. I didn't expect that when I woke up this morning. This story is so... Just even talking about it is quite divisive, I think. I think people got their short hairs up thinking about this. So we could probably talk about it for another 3 hours, but we don't have that time. We do continue this conversation during the week, though. You can tweet with me at Monica Perez Show. I try to answer every tweet. And Binkley, they can get our podcast how?
They can go to propagandareportdaily.com and click on the Apple or the Google button on the right side.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week, Saturday, 3 to 6. This is Monica Perez.